Tonight we delve into ancient Greece, an era with more gods than people. Hey guys, tonight we are diving deep, and I mean deep, into one of those delightfully peculiar corners of Greek mythology. We're talking about a time when gods outnumbered sensible dinner party guests. And frankly, you'd probably be better off picnicking alone. Imagine a world where sharing isn't just caring. It's a biological necessity involving, shall we say, unique dental plans and an eyeball on a timeshare. Yes, we're venturing into the misty, slightly unsettling, and hilariously awkward domain of the Grey Sisters. Those lovely old dears who took past the parcel to a whole new anatomical level. You know, the kind of story that makes you think, well, my family gatherings could be worse. And if you're wondering if you'd survive in ancient Greece with your modern sensibilities, probably not past the first confusing oracle pronouncement. To be honest, so before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're at it, maybe drop a comment below letting me know what city you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. It's always fascinating to see where these sleepy stories are drifting off to. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Imagine, if you will, you've just stepped off a rather rickety time-traveling, well, let's call it a particularly drowsy cloud, and landed softly in ancient Greece. Not the shiny marble-columned philosophical Greece you see in polished documentaries, oh no. We're talking about the everyday, slightly grimy, and bewilderingly superstitious Greece of mythic times. The air itself feels different here, a curious blend of sea salt carried on a warm breeze. The scent of wild thyme crushed underfoot and something else, a faint, almost metallic tang, the lingering aroma of a recently appeased or perhaps angered deity. You quickly realize that in this world, you can't throw a well-aimed discus or even a mildly interesting pebble without hitting a minor god's sacred grove, or at least startling a nymph who was trying to have a quiet nap by her stream. It's a place teeming with divinity, almost comically so. Every river bend has its resident naiad, every imposing oak tree its somewhat grumpy dryad, and every gust of wind might just be Boreas having a bit of a tantrum. Up on Mount Olympus, Zeus is likely in the middle of another celestial soap opera, probably involving a swan, a shower of gold, or some other disguise that really wouldn't fool anyone with decent eyesight. Hera, his long-suffering wife, is understandably miffed, probably plotting some elaborate yet ultimately ineffective revenge. Poseidon's stirring up the seas because someone forgot to offer him the choicest cut of sacrificial tuna, and Hades is just down below, meticulously cataloging souls and wondering if Cerberus needs a new chew toy. This is your mainstream knowledge, the big players. But then there are the others, the thousands upon thousands of lesser spirits, local deities, and half-forgotten divine entities. Did you know, for instance, that some remote villages probably had a god specifically for the unfortunate creaking of doors, or a tiny, almost invisible deity you'd pray to so your cheese wouldn't go moldy too quickly? Okay, maybe not specifically cheese mold, but the proliferation of highly specialized minor gods for every conceivable and inconceivable aspect of life was staggering. It's a detail that often gets glossed over, but it paints a picture of a world utterly saturated with the supernatural. You couldn't stub your toe without potentially offending the spirit of that particular paving stone. And the sheer number of these divine beings, well, Historians and classicists still get into surprisingly heated, albeit very polite, debates about the exact celestial census. Was it hundreds? Thousands? Did that particularly mossy rock over there have its own indwelling spirit, or was it just a particularly opinionated rock? The lines were wonderfully blurry, which of course kept everyone on their toes. You learn to walk carefully, to murmur apologies to the air if you sneeze too loudly just in case. It's a constant low-level hum of better safe than sorry when it comes to divine etiquette. Trying to keep track of who was who demanded what kind of sacrifice, honey cakes for one, a specific type of bird for another, perhaps just a heartfelt, whispered promise for a third, was a full-time job. And woe betide you if you mixed them up. It's in this sprawling, slightly chaotic and divinely overcrowded world that creatures like the Grey, our stars for tonight, could exist. Tucked away in some shadowy, ill-defined corner of the map, far from the glittering dramas of Olympus, yet playing their own crucial, if rather squishy role in the grand unfolding tapestry of myth. They weren't exactly household names, not like Athena with her wisdom or Apollo with his lyre. They were more like a whispered rumor, a chilling bedtime story to keep naughty children from wandering too far into the woods. The kind of beings that thrive in the twilight zones, the places where the known world frays into the unknown. And it's into that very twilight we're now drifting, feeling the familiar ground beneath our feet give way to something a little stranger. The sun begins to dip below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of bruised purple and sleepy orange. And the first stars are pricking the velvet expanse above. The cicadas, nature's own white noise machines, begin their nightly chorus, a relentless, soothing drone that forms the perfect soundtrack for a world teetering between the mundane and the utterly bizarre. You take a slow, deep breath, feeling the day's tension begin to melt away, as the first hints of the Grey's peculiar tale begin to coalesce in the deepening gloom. You, Perseus, receive a nearly impossible mission. Now, picture yourself, not as a disembodied, sleepy observer anymore, but as a young man, a hero in the making. Let's call you Perseus. Yes, that Perseus. Though right now you don't feel much like a hero. You're more like a very stressed intern who's just been handed an impossible assignment by a particularly tyrannical boss. Your boss in this instance is King Polydectes of Seriphos, a rather unpleasant fellow with a lecherous eye on your lovely mother Danae. And his impossible assignment? Oh, just a small thing. He wants the head of Medusa. You know Medusa, the gorgon with the unfortunate hair condition, snakes writhing, hissing, venomous snakes, and a gaze that turns living flesh to stone. Easy peasy, right? Like popping down to the corner store for a loaf of bread. If the baker was a petrifying monster. You're standing on the shores of Seriphos, the salty spray misting your face. The rhythmic sigh of the waves a mocking counterpoint to the frantic thumping in your chest. Polydectes, that smug old goat, had issued this demand at a grand banquet. A feast where all the other nobles had brought him lavish gifts of horses. You, being rather, well, heroically impoverished, had rashly boasted you could bring him anything he desired, even the head of a gorgon, just to save face. A classic case of your mouth writing a check your heroic abilities might not be able to cash. And Polydectes, seeing his chance to get rid of you and have a clear run at your mom, had pounced on your offer with a predatory grin. Excellent, Perseus, he'd boomed, all false bonhomie. The head of Medusa it is. A truly fitting gift for a king. The silence that followed was thick enough to carve, You felt the blood drain from your face. Now the full weight of that boast is crashing down on you. This isn't just a dangerous quest. It's a suicide mission. No one who has ever gone to face Medusa has returned. Or if they have, they've returned as rather artistic, if somewhat lifeless garden ornaments. The stories are whispered in hushed tones, brave warriors, proud kings, even the occasional overconfident demigod, all frozen in eternal stony surprise. And you? You're a young man, strong, yes, brave, or perhaps just foolhardy, but you lack the divine parentage of, say, Heracles or the cunning of Odysseus. You're relying on raw courage and a growing sense of dread. The problem is, Medusa isn't exactly listed in the local heroes directory. Gorgon's lair of turn left at the big scary rock, beware the statues. There are no maps to her hidden island, no helpful travel guides. She resides in a place beyond the edge of the known world, a place only spoken of in fearful whispers. This is a mainstream historical, or rather mythological, sticking point. The exact location of the Gorgon's lair. Some ancient writers placed it in the far west, near the realm of Oceanus, the great world-encircling river. Others suggested Libya or even Scythia. The truth is, nobody really knew, which of course only added to the terror. It was the ultimate "here be dragons" on the ancient mariner's chart. How do you even begin to find someone whose address is somewhere over there, probably deadly? You're sitting on a rock, head in your hands, the sound of the waves doing absolutely nothing to soothe your frayed nerves. You need a plan. You need divine intervention. You need more than just a pointy stick and a prayer, that's for sure. The thought of your mother, Danae, her gentle face creased with worry, flashes through your mind. She's the reason you're in this mess indirectly. Polydectes' desire for her is the poisoned wellspring of this whole perilous undertaking, but her image also strengthens your resolve. You can't let that odious king win. You have to try, even if trying means walking into almost certain petrification. Suddenly, as if summoned by the sheer intensity of your despair, a shimmering light appears beside you. It's not the harsh glare of the sun, but a softer, more intelligent radiance. You blink, and as your eyes adjust, you see them. Two figures radiating an aura of, Olympian power. They're not exactly blending in with the local fishermen. One is a woman, tall and imposing, with eyes that seem to hold all the wisdom of the ages, a spear held lightly in one hand, an owl perched, perhaps a little judgmentally, on her shoulder. The other is a younger man, a mischievous glint in his eye, winged sandals on his feet, and a herald's staff, the caduceus, twined with two serene-looking snakes, a rather ironic accessory given your current predicament. You, Perseus, are about to get some very high-level and very much needed advice, or at least some cryptic directions. Tip: Athena and Hermes point you down a more circuitous path. You scramble to your feet, nearly tripping over a stray piece of driftwood, your heart doing a nervous flutter kick against your ribs. Before you stand Athena, goddess of wisdom, warfare, and a surprising number of crafts, and Hermes, the divine messenger, god of travelers, thieves, and fast-talking salesmen. If you were going to pick two deities to help you out of a seemingly impossible monster-related jam, you couldn't have done much better. Athena regards you with a cool, appraising gaze, the kind that makes you feel she's already x-rayed your soul and found it adequate, perhaps. Hermes, on the other hand, offers a quick, encouraging grin, as if this whole slay the snake-haired lady business is just a fun little errand. Perseus, son of Danae, Athena's voice is calm, clear, and carries an undeniable authority. like a headmistress who also happens to be an undefeated chess champion. We know of your predicament. She doesn't say your idiotic boast, but it's heavily implied. And we are here to offer our aid, for the task you have undertaken is one that no mortal can accomplish alone. Well, that's a relief, and also slightly terrifying. If the gods themselves admit it's that hard, your odds just went from slim to microscopic. Hermes chimes in, his voice more like a conspiratorial whisper. Indeed. King Polydectes is a nasty piece of work, isn't he? Trying to strong-arm your dear mother. Bad form, very bad form. We can't have that, he winks. Besides, a good heroic quest always livens things up on Olympus. It's a bit dull sometimes, you know. All that nectar and ambrosia. One needs a bit of mortal peril to spice things up vicariously. You get the distinct impression Hermes is here as much for the entertainment value as for any noble purpose. Athena, ever the pragmatist, gets straight to the point. To defeat Medusa, she says, her gaze unwavering, you will require certain tools that are not easily found. You cannot simply march up to her lair with a sword and shield. Her gaze, as you know, is her most potent weapon. She pauses, letting that sink in. You will need a shield polished to a mirror's sheen so you may see her reflection without meeting her eyes directly. You will need a sword sharp enough to sever her snake-crowned head in a single blow. It is said that only an adamantine sickle or a harp can do this, and you will need a special wallet, a cabesis to safely contain the severed head, for its power to petrify remains even in death. Oh, and winged sandals so you can make a swift getaway? And a cap of invisibility, often called the Helm of Hades, would be rather useful. You just stare at them, your jaw probably hanging open. A mirrored shield, a magic sword, a special monster head bag, flying shoes, and an invisibility hat. Right. Like you can just pop down to the local divine blacksmith and pick those up. And where, O mighty Athena, might I find these rather specific items? You manage to stammer out. This is where the helpful advice takes a rather convoluted turn. Ah, says Hermes, tapping his caduceus thoughtfully. That's the tricky bit. These items are in the keeping of the nymphs of the north, sometimes called the Stygian nymphs. And they, he draws out the word, are not exactly on any map. To find the nymphs, Athena continues, her expression serious, you must first seek out the Graeae. They alone know the path to the nymphs, the Graeae. You vaguely recall hearing stories about them. 3 ancient sisters, old even by divine standards, living somewhere in a perpetually twilit land. But the details are fuzzy, mostly centered around, well, their rather unusual sharing habits. This is a classic example of how Greek myths often involve these nested quests, like a set of Russian dolls, each task leading to another, more obscure one. You don't just go fight the monster. You have to find the guy who knows where the magic monster-slaying Uber is. It's all very bureaucratic in a mythical sort of way. The Graeae? You ask, a sense of unease creeping in. And how do I find them? Hermes grins again, that's slightly unsettling. This is going to be fun for me, not so much for you, grin. Ah, yes. The Graeae. Sisters to the Gorgons, actually. Daughters of Phorcys, the old man of the sea, and Ceto, the sea monster. A charming family all around. He seems to find this hilarious. They dwell in a land of perpetual twilight, near the edge of the world where night and day meet, or perhaps in a cave somewhere in the far, frozen north. Sources vary, as they so often do in these matters. Even the ancient storytellers couldn't quite agree on their exact address. A point scholars still debate with surprising passion at academic conferences. usually over lukewarm coffee and slightly stale biscuits. Athena adds, "They are three, Dano, Enyo, and Pamphredo, and they share amongst themselves but one eye and one tooth. You must contrive to take these from them. Only then in their desperation will they reveal the way to the nymphs. One eye, one tooth, for three sisters." Suddenly King Polydectes' demand seems almost reasonable in comparison. The image of this bizarre geriatric trio fumbling for their shared molar or peeper is both comical and deeply unsettling. This friendly advice from the gods is leading you down a path that seems to be getting progressively weirder and definitely more awkward. Your heroic quest is turning into a rather macabre game of keep-away. Seeking the elusive old sisters, you start asking about those mysterious sisters sharing unique features. So, armed with this enlightening, if somewhat disturbing information from Athena and Hermes, you find yourself back on your own, the divine radiance having faded, leaving you with a head full of bizarre instructions and a distinctly queasy feeling in your stomach. The gods, in their infinite wisdom and perhaps mischief, have pointed you in a direction. But it's a direction that leads through a fog of rumor and into the realm of the truly strange. Your first task, find these shared organ sisters, the Grey. No pressure, you start asking around. Discreetly, of course. You can't exactly walk into the local agora and bellow, "Anyone know where I can find three ancient ladies who pass an eyeball around like a party favor?" That sort of inquiry tends to get you either laughed out of town or quietly escorted to a room with padded walls. So you begin with the old fishermen mending their nets by the shore, their faces as weathered and creased as ancient maps. They've seen a lot in their long lives, heard countless tales carried on the salt-laden winds. The Grey eye, one old salt rasps, squinting at you from under a bushy white eyebrow. His name is Theron, and he smells faintly of brine and fermented fish. I heard of them. Daughters of the old man of the sea, they say, live where the sun fears to tread. He gestures vaguely towards the north or perhaps the west. It's hard to tell with old sailors, their sense of direction can be a bit fluid. Never met anyone who's seen him and come back to describe the wallpaper. If you catch my drift. Another younger fisherman, perhaps a bit more widely traveled, chimes in. Some say they guard the path to the Gorgons themselves, though why anyone would want that path is beyond me. He shudders. They're said to be ancient beyond imagining, born with gray hair. That's why they're called the Grey, the Grey Ones. This is a common etymological point, the name itself hinting at their primordial age and pallor. It's one of those neat little linguistic tie-ins that scholars love to point out. You press for more details. Where exactly is this land where the sun fears to tread? Theron spits thoughtfully onto the sand. Now that's the million drachma question, ain't it? Some say it's beyond the Pillars of Heracles out in the great unknown ocean. Others whisper of a frozen cave near the land of the Hyperboreans where the north wind is born. And I once heard a merchant captain, 3 sheets to the wind in a tavern in Corinth, swear they lived on an island shrouded in perpetual mist, somewhere off the coast of, well, he couldn't quite remember where, but he was very insistent about the mist. The details are frustratingly vague, often contradictory. This is a common feature in many myths. The precise geography is often left deliberately undefined, adding to the sense of otherworldliness and making the hero's journey all the more challenging. It's not like they had Google Maps back then. Just search for creepy cave occupants 3 eyes 1. The lack of concrete information is in itself a kind of obstacle. You're chasing shadows, following whispers. You spend days, perhaps weeks, gathering these fragmented clues. You talk to wizened old women who sell herbs and charms, their eyes holding a knowing gleam. You consult with traveling poets and storytellers who collect myths and legends like rare coins. Some of their tales are wild and fantastical, clearly embellished for dramatic effect. Others have a ring of unsettling plausibility. One particularly strange and possibly entirely fabricated bit of lore you pick up from a slightly deranged-looking goatherd who claimed to have once shared a particularly strong cheese with a satyr was that the Grey only ever spoke in riddles, and their voices sounded like dry leaves rustling in a forgotten tomb. You decide to take that particular fact with a very large grain of salt. The consensus, if such a thing can be gleaned from the tangle of folklore, is that you need to head towards the bleak, less traveled regions of the world, away from the sun-drenched islands and bustling city-states, into the twilight zones, the liminal spaces where the ordinary rules no longer apply. The journey itself becomes a sort of winnowing process. You leave behind the familiar comforts, the well-trodden paths. The landscape grows harsher, the settlements fewer and farther between. The people you encounter become more reticent, their eyes more guarded. They've heard the same stories you have, and they know that some paths are best left untrodden. You might find yourself bartering for passage on a creaking merchant ship heading to some remote northern port, the kind of place where the taverns are filled with grim-faced men who speak in gruff monosyllables and carry suspiciously large knives. Or perhaps you journey overland through dark forests where the trees seem to watch you with ancient silent malice, and across desolate moors where the wind whispers forgotten names. The journey is as much a mental one as a physical one, stripping away your preconceptions, forcing you to rely on your wits and your rapidly dwindling supply of optimism. Every rustle in the undergrowth, every shadow that flickers at the edge of your vision, could be a sign, or just your imagination running wild in the growing gloom. You are quite literally heading into the unknown, chasing a rumor about 3 very old, very odd ladies, groping through the mist. You're approaching their gloomy, isolated lair. The air grows colder, the light dimmer. You've left the lands of olive groves and sun-baked earth far behind. Now you trudge through a landscape perpetually draped in a kind of pre-dawn gloom, or perhaps a never-ending twilight. The sun, when it bothers to appear at all, is a pale, watery disk low on the horizon, offering little warmth and even less cheer. This is the kind of place that saps your will. A land that feels tired, ancient, as if it remembers a time before gods and men, a time of primal forces and formless beings. Mist clings to everything, coiling around the gnarled, leafless trees like ghostly serpents. It muffles sound, creating an eerie, almost suffocating silence, broken only by the drip, drip, drip of moisture from unseen branches, or the mournful cry of some unidentifiable bird in the distance. Your boots squelch in the damp, peaty soil. Every so often, a gust of wind, cold and smelling of damp stone and something vaguely like ancient dust, will momentarily tear a hole in the fog, revealing a desolate vista of gray rocks, stagnant pools, and skeletal bushes. It's not a landscape that inspires sonnets. It's a landscape that makes you want to find a very deep hole and pull it in after you. You've been following the vaguest of directions, a series of head towards that really depressing-looking mountain range, and when you reach the river that looks like it's given up on life, turn left. It's a miracle you haven't ended up walking in circles, or accidentally stumbling into the lair of some other equally unpleasant mythical creature. Perhaps Athena and Hermes are subtly nudging you in the right direction, a divine GPS working on a subliminal level. Or maybe you're just getting lucky. Historians still debate whether heroes in Greek myths were masters of their own fate or merely puppets of divine will. It's a classic free will versus determinism argument, played out with thunderbolts and tridents. You come to a place where the ground slopes downwards, into a shadowy ravine or a wide, shallow cave mouth half hidden by a curtain of clinging ivy. The air here is noticeably colder and carries a faint, peculiar smell. It's not quite decay, not quite anything you can readily identify. It's musty, like a room that hasn't been aired in centuries, with an underlying tang of something metallic and salty. Like very, very old tears, perhaps, or maybe just ancient shared saliva. The thought makes you shudder. A sense of profound unease settles over you, heavier than the damp air. This feels like the place. It has that end-of-the-world vibe, that you really shouldn't be here ambiance. There are no signs, no welcoming committee, just a deepening gloom and a silence that feels watchful. You can almost feel the weight of ages pressing down on you. This isn't just an old place. It's a place outside of time. A forgotten corner of creation. You find yourself hesitating at the entrance to whatever lies beyond. Is it a cave? A fissure in the rock? The mist is so thick here it's hard to tell. It swirls and eddies, sometimes revealing a glimpse of dark, rough-hewn stone, sometimes just more gray nothingness. This deliberate ambiguity of their dwelling is a recurring theme in the sparse ancient descriptions. Was it a cave, a grotto, or some kind of primordial hut? The details are tantalizingly scarce, which of course allows the imagination to run wild, usually in a rather creepy direction. One lesser-known fragment from a lost play by Aeschylus supposedly described their home as being paved with the bones of unanswered questions, and which is wonderfully poetic but not terribly helpful for navigation. You take a deep breath, trying to steady your nerves. You've come this far. Turning back now isn't really an option. Not if you want to save your mother and, not be the laughingstock of Seriphos for the rest of your probably very short life. You clutch the hilt of your sword. A perfectly ordinary, non-magical sword at this point, which suddenly feels woefully inadequate. What good is a sword against, well, whatever awaits you in there? You can't exactly stab extreme old age. Slowly, cautiously, you push aside a curtain of damp, trailing moss that hangs over the entrance. The darkness within is almost absolute, a palpable blackness that seems to swallow the faint twilight from outside. You can hear a faint rhythmic sound from within, a soft sighing, almost gurgling noise. And is that a sniffle? Or perhaps the sound of someone struggling to clear their throat with a distinct lack of available moisture? The mundane, almost pathetic nature of these sounds makes the whole situation even more bizarre. You were expecting eldritch chanting perhaps, or the echoing pronouncements of ancient oracles. Instead, you get noises that sound suspiciously like three very old ladies in serious need of a lozenge and possibly a dehumidifier. With a growing sense of trepidation, and a silent prayer to any god who might still be listening and feeling generous, you step forward into the gloom, feeling your way into the heart of the Grey's domain. First sight of this sharing sisterhood, their appearance, lives up to the legend. They share more than just secrets. As your eyes slowly, painfully begin to adjust to the oppressive darkness, shapes start to coalesce out of the gloom. You're in a cavern, or perhaps a large, roughly constructed chamber. The air is thick with the smell you noticed outside, that musty, ancient, vaguely salty aroma, now stronger, almost cloying. There's a faint, flickering light source somewhere in the center of the space, casting long, dancing shadows that writhe and twist on the damp stone walls, making the already unsettling atmosphere even more so. It's not a comforting fire, more like a sputtering, reluctant flame from a primitive oil lamp or perhaps some kind of phosphorescent fungus clinging to the rock. And then you see them, huddled together near the feeble light, like three ancient gray moths drawn to a dying ember. The gray they are, exactly as advertised, and yet somehow more profoundly unsettling than you'd imagined. Calling them old feels like a cosmic understatement. They seem to be made of wrinkles, of time itself solidified into hunched, frail forms. Their skin is the color of bleached parchment, stretched thin over prominent bones. Their hair, long and lank, is not just gray, but a startling, almost luminous white, like spun moonlight or the frost on a winter branch. They are draped in shapeless gray garments that seem to meld with the shadows, making them look like extensions of the cave itself. Ancient stone given a semblance of life. There are three of them. As the story said, Dano, the dreadful; Enyo, the warlike or horror, which seems a bit much for these frail creatures, but names can be deceiving; and Pemfredo, the alarming, or she who guides the way, which is perhaps more fitting for your current needs. Though to be honest, in this dim, flickering light, they're virtually indistinguishable. Three hunched figures muttering and rustling like dry leaves. One of them, you can't tell which, lets out a soft, wheezing cough that seems to echo unnaturally in the enclosed space. They haven't noticed you yet. They seem entirely engrossed in, well, it's hard to say what. They're huddled close, their heads almost touching, and there's a low murmur of voices too faint for you to make out actual words. It sounds like a constant low-level bickering, or perhaps just the rambling, disjointed conversation of the very, very old. Maybe they're complaining about the damp or who misplaced the communal. Well, you'll get to that. The detail that truly captures your attention, the one that makes your stomach do a little flip-flop, isn't their age or their spectral appearance. It's the fact that, as far as you can tell in the gloom, only one of them seems to have a functioning face. Or rather, only one of them at any given moment seems to be fully looking at anything. The other two have their heads tilted, their faces oddly blank, their eye sockets shadowed and empty. It's a profoundly disconcerting sight. This sharing of a single eye and a single tooth is, of course, their most famous and arguably most bizarre characteristic. It's a detail that has fascinated and perplexed scholars for centuries. Why one eye? Why one tooth? Was it symbolic? A punishment from some forgotten god? Or just a really, really unfortunate genetic quirk in a very small divine family? The ancient sources offer no definitive explanation, which naturally has led to a plethora of theories. Some suggest it represents their limited perception, their connection to a singular prophetic vision. Others see it as a metaphor for shared resources in a harsh environment, or perhaps even a darkly comic commentary on the frailties of old age. The academic debate still rages, as they say, though perhaps mildly speculates over tea is more accurate in this case. You watch, frozen in the shadows near the entrance, as one of the sisters, let's call her Sister A, who currently seems to be in possession of the ocular apparatus, leans forward, peering intently at something in her gnarled hands. The other two, Sister B and Sister C, sit patiently, their empty socketed faces turned vaguely in her direction, like sunflowers deprived of their sun. There's a strange, almost ritualistic quality to their stillness. Then Sister A makes a soft sighing sound, and with a slow, deliberate movement she removes the eye. You see it now, a single luminous orb, surprisingly large and bright, almost like a polished gemstone. She holds it out and Sister B, with an uncanny, fumbling accuracy, reaches out her own skeletal hand and takes it. There's a faint, wet, plosive sound as Sister B carefully inserts the eye into her own empty socket. Her head twitches and suddenly her face is alive, her gaze sharp and focused while Sister A slumps back, her face now slack and vacant. The whole exchange is completed in a strange, unsettling silence, a practiced, age-old routine. It's both grotesque and strangely matter-of-fact. You feel a wave of nausea, mixed with a perverse fascination. Dinner parties at their place, you reflect, must indeed be an exercise in patience and very careful hand-eye, or rather hand-socket coordination. The thought of them trying to share a single olive with one tooth and one eye, it boggles the mind. The eye's journey. You witness the eyeball's awkward transfer between them. You're still lurking in the shadows, trying to process the sheer, unadulterated weirdness of what you've just witnessed. The single luminous eye has now been successfully transferred from Sister A, now slumped and sightless, to Sister B. Sister B blinks. A slow, deliberate movement as if getting used to the sensation of sight again. The eye itself seems to gleam with an unnatural intensity in the dim cavern light, almost as if it possesses its own internal luminescence. It swivels in its new socket, taking in the familiar, gloomy surroundings before finally, inevitably, landing on you. There's a sharp, indrawn hiss, like air escaping a punctured wineskin. It's not a sound of aggression, more like startled surprise, the kind of noise one makes when discovering a particularly large and unexpected spider in the bath. Sister B, now the designated lookout, leans forward, her newly acquired eye narrowing. The other two sisters, Pamfredo and Dano, or whichever combination they currently represent, stir at the sound, their sightless faces turning vaguely in your direction, a ripple of unease passing through their huddled forms. A visitor? Sister B's voice is thin and reedy, like wind whistling through a cracked tombstone. It cracks with disuse, as if words are a rare and precious commodity they can't afford to waste. Who comes to the home of the Grey unbidden? You step forward, trying to project an air of calm confidence you absolutely do not feel. Your heart is hammering like a trapped bird. Greetings, venerable ones, you manage, your voice sounding a little too loud in the oppressive silence. I am Perseus, son of Danae. I come seeking your wisdom. Smooth. Very heroic. You conveniently leave out the part about planning to snatch their only means of seeing the world. The eye, currently residing in Sister B's head, scrutinizes you from head to toe. It's an unnerving experience, like being examined by a particularly ancient and judgmental bird. You can almost feel it cataloging your threadbare cloak, your slightly muddy boots, the nervous sweat beading on your forehead. Wisdom, croaks Sister C. Let's assume it's her turn to be vaguely aware, her voice even fainter than Sister B's. We have little wisdom left, young one. Only age and memories. So many memories, like dust motes in a forgotten sunbeam. There's a profound weariness in her tone that makes you feel a momentary pang of sympathy, quickly suppressed by the knowledge of your mission. The eye continues its relentless stare. Why do you seek us? Sister B demands, a hint of suspicion in her reedy voice. Few tread the paths to our door, and fewer still seek what we possess. She doesn't elaborate on what that possession might be, but the implication hangs heavy in the damp air. You try to sound earnest. I am on a perilous quest set for me by King Polydectes. To succeed, I must find the nymphs of the north. And it is said that only you, wise gray, know the way to their hidden abode. A dry, rustling sound comes from Sister A, the one currently without sight. It might be a sigh, or perhaps just the creaking of ancient joints. The nymphs, she murmurs, her voice barely a whisper. A long road, a hidden road. Now comes the tricky part. You know they won't give up their precious secret willingly. You have to create an opportunity. You glance around the dim cavern, your eyes now more accustomed to the gloom. You see their meager possessions, a few rough-hewn stone stools, a flickering lamp, perhaps a pile of dried moss in a corner that serves as a communal bed. It's a life of extreme, almost unimaginable austerity. This focus on their poverty and isolation is a subtle detail found in some interpretations, contrasting sharply with the often opulent lives of the Olympian gods. It makes their attachment to their single eye and tooth even more poignant, and your impending theft even more. Well, morally gray, the eye is still fixed on you. Sister B seems to be the designated spokesperson, by virtue of currently being the only one who can actually see you. The path to the nymphs is not for mortals to tread lightly, she says, her voice gaining a little more strength. What makes you worthy of such knowledge, Perseus, son of Danae? This is your cue. But how to engineer the snatch? You can't just lunge. They're frail, yes, but they're also supernatural beings, and there are 3 of them even if only one can see at a time. You need a distraction, a moment of confusion. As if on cue, or perhaps sensing the shift in your intentions, Sister B decides it's time for a change of ocular guard. My turn with the sight is done, she announces, not to you but to her sisters. Pemfredo, are you ready? Sister C, Pemfredo apparently, nods her sightless head. As I'll ever be, dear sister. And then with the same slow, practiced deliberation you witnessed before, Sister B reaches up to her face. Her gnarled fingers gently, almost tenderly, pry the luminous eye from her socket. For a horrifying, suspended moment, the eye is in midair, held delicately between her thumb and forefinger, before she begins to pass it towards Pemfredo's waiting, outstretched hand. It's during this transfer, this brief, vulnerable moment when the eye is unhoused, a free agent, that you know you must act. The fate of your quest, your mother, and your own heroic reputation hangs on this single, grotesque, and incredibly risky maneuver. The single eye, gleaming like a captured star, is about to make its precarious journey from one ancient hand to another. The tooth's relay race. Next, the equally bizarre handover of their single tooth. The moment stretches, taffy-like, suspended in the dim, flickering light of the cavern. The luminous eye, their sole connection to the visual world, hovers precariously between the outstretched, trembling hand of Ennio, Sister B, who just relinquished it, and the eagerly awaiting, equally gnarled fingers of Pemfredo, Sister C. Dano, Sister A, sits sightless and patient, a silent observer to this crucial, almost sacred daily ritual. You can hear your own breath, loud and ragged in the stillness. This is it, your one shot. As the eye begins its slow transit, you lunge, not with a roar, not with a heroic battle cry, that would be counterproductive. Instead, you move with a swift, silent desperation, like a shadow detaching itself from the wall. Your hand darts out, aiming not for the sisters themselves, but for that small, gleaming orb suspended between them. Your fingers, clumsy with adrenaline, close around something surprisingly firm, smooth, and slightly cool to the touch. You've got it. You've actually got the eye. A collective startled gasp, thin and reedy, echoes through the cavern. It's followed by a moment of stunned, bewildered silence. Then chaos, the eye. Where is the eye? Pemfredo's voice is a panicked squeak. Her hands, which moments before were reaching for the precious organ, now grope blindly in the air in front of her. Ennio, you dropped it.
You clumsy old fool!
Dano, the hitherto silent and sightless one, suddenly finds her voice, sharp and accusatory. Even without sight, she seems to have a keen sense of when things have gone pear-shaped. The accusation itself is a darkly humorous touch. How can you be clumsy with something you can't even see as being passed? I did not drop it, Ennio retorts, her voice trembling with indignation and rising panic. It was taken. She too is now waving her arms around, trying to locate the missing orb, or perhaps the thief. You back away slowly, clutching the eye in your fist. It feels strangely alive in your palm, a faint warmth emanating from it, or perhaps that's just your own sweaty hand. The thought of holding a living eyeball, even a mythical one, is profoundly unsettling. You try not to think about it too hard. Taken? By whom? There is no one here but us. Pemfredo wails, her voice cracking with despair. The three sisters are now a picture of utter confusion, a flurry of gray robes and flailing skeletal limbs in the dim light. They bump into each other, patting the damp stone floor, their sightless faces masks of bewildered terror. It's a pathetic sight, and a small, unwelcome worm of guilt squirms in your gut. You are, after all, exploiting the vulnerability of three very old, very handicapped individuals. But then you remember Medusa and King Polydectes, and your mother's anxious face, and the guilt recedes, replaced by a grim determination. This is the pivotal moment, the one often depicted in ancient art, albeit usually with more dramatic flair and less pathetic fumbling. The hero Perseus bravely, or cunningly, depending on your interpretation, depriving the Grey of their sight. The morality of this act is, of course, something theologians and philosophers could, and probably have, debated for eons. Is it a justifiable means to a noble end, or a rather shabby trick played on the defenseless? The myths rarely offer easy answers on such matters. Who speaks? Who is there? Ennio cries out, her voice laced with fear. Show yourself, thief, and give us back our eye, Pemfredo adds, her tone a mixture of pleading and impotent rage. Now, as if the sudden deprivation of their shared vision wasn't enough, a new crisis arises. Dano, who has been patting her own lap in a distressed manner, lets out a particularly anguished cry. And the tooth. Where is the tooth? I had it just a moment ago. Oh, wonderful. It seems in the ensuing chaos of the eye snatching, their other shared, precious commodity has also gone astray. Perhaps it was dislodged during their frantic movements, or maybe Dano in her agitation simply misplaced it. The single tooth presumably used for masticating whatever meager, soft sustenance they consumed. Nectar-soaked breadcrumbs? Ambrosia-flavored gruel? I was apparently next in the sharing rotation, or perhaps just kept safe by the sister not currently on eye duty. The thought of them trying to eat without their communal molar is somehow even more pathetic than them being without their eye. At least sight is a passive sense for them in their dark cave. Eating is an act of necessity. One ancient and probably apocryphal text humorously suggests their diet consisted mainly of well-mashed regrets and the occasional soft-boiled prophecy. The image this conjures is both bleak and absurd. Now they are truly in a state, Sightless and toothless, at least in a communal sense. Their panic escalates. Their voices become a cacophony of reedy wails and accusations. He has our eye, and our tooth is gone. We are blind and gummy. This is almost too easy, or perhaps too sad, but you steel yourself. You need that information. You seize the moment, snatching away their only light. The cavern is filled with the discordant symphony of their distress. Three ancient voices, thin and quavering, rise and fall in a chorus of accusation and despair. Our eye, our precious sight. The tooth, not the tooth. How will we manage? Oh, the indignity, the sheer unmitigated horror. It's a bit much even for you. You almost expect one of them to faint dramatically, though given their apparent constitution, they might just crumble into dust. You clear your throat, loudly this time, trying to cut through their cacophony of woe. Venerable Grey Eye, you begin, trying to sound firm but not overly menacing. You are, after all, holding their entire sensory world hostage in your sweaty palm. I am the one who has your eye. A sudden shocked silence descends. Even their frantic, sightless groping seems to pause. You can almost feel their collective, unseeing attention focus on the sound of your voice. You admit it? Enyo's voice is a horrified whisper. You would steal from the aged and infirm? It was a low trick, young man. Pemfredo adds, her voice trembling with outrage. A dastardly deed. Dano, ever the pragmatist even in crisis, cuts to the chase. What do you want, boy? Why have you plunged us into darkness and potential gumminess? You hold up the eye even though you know they can't see it. It's more for your own dramatic emphasis. The faint light from their sputtering lamp catches its surface, making it gleam faintly. I want the path to the nymphs of the north, you state. Your voice as steady as you can make it. Tell me how to find them, and your eye will be returned to you. Safe and sound. You conveniently omit any mention of the tooth, mostly because you don't actually have their tooth. Its whereabouts are currently a mystery, probably lying forlornly in a dusty corner of the cave, a forgotten casualty of the Great Eye heist. You hope they don't press the issue of the missing molar too hard. There's a rustle of ancient fabric as they seem to confer in hushed, urgent whispers. You can't make out the words, but the tone is one of agitation and desperate debate. You can imagine the internal conflict. Reveal a secret they've guarded for eons or remain sightless indefinitely. It's a tough call for anyone, let alone three sisters who have built their entire, rather limited existence around this shared ocular resource. The concept of opportunity is key here. The myths are full of heroes exploiting momentary weaknesses or unique vulnerabilities to gain an advantage over powerful or knowledgeable beings. It's not always fair in the modern sense, but it's a recurring motif. Think of Odysseus outwitting Polyphemus by getting him drunk and blinding his single eye. A rather close parallel, actually, though Polyphemus was considerably more monstrous and less, well, geriatric. Whether this reflects a might makes right attitude or simply the harsh realities of a world where divine favor and cunning are paramount, is again a topic for scholarly chin-stroking. Historians continue to debate the ethical frameworks, or lack thereof, present in these ancient narratives. The nymphs. Enyo finally says, her voice heavy with reluctance. Their path is secret, shielded from mortal knowledge for a reason. And what of our tooth? Dano interjects, her voice sharp with suspicion. You have that too, don't you, you dental despoiler. You feign ignorance. Tooth? I know nothing of a tooth. I only have the eye. Perhaps it rolled under one of these charming stone stools during the misunderstanding. You make a mental note to subtly kick around for it later if things go well. Restoring their sight and their bite might earn you some bonus goodwill, or at least lessen the curses they'll inevitably hurl at your retreating back. A likely story. Pemfredo scoffs, though there's a note of uncertainty in her voice now. The immediate crisis of blindness probably outweighs the more long-term inconvenience of a purely liquid diet. The eye is my only concern, and my only bargaining chip. You reiterate firmly. Tell me the way to the nymphs and it is yours again. Refuse and, well, I imagine this cavern gets very dark indeed. You try to sound menacing, but it's hard when you're essentially threatening 3 very old ladies with eternal optometrist-related inconvenience. Another pause. Longer this time. The only sound is the faint sputtering hiss of the lamp and the distant mournful drip of water, somewhere deeper in the cave. You can feel the weight of their unseen ancient gaze even without the eye. They are old, incredibly old, and probably possess a wisdom that transcends mere sight. But right now, their entire world has narrowed to the single precious orb you hold in your hand. The choice is stark. Their sacred secret or their sight. The power dynamic has shifted entirely, all thanks to one swift, ethically dubious snatch, forced friendly negotiation. They panic, and you seize the chance to demand key information. The silence in the cavern stretches, taut and heavy until it feels like the air itself is holding its breath. The 3 sisters, a huddled mass of gray fabric and ancient bones, seem to shrink further into themselves. You can almost hear the creak of their ancient minds weighing the options, the centuries of guarded secrecy warring with the immediate desperate need for their shared vision. Finally, a sigh as dry and rustling as autumn leaves escapes one of them, Enyo perhaps, who seems to have become their reluctant spokesperson in blindness. Very well, mortal, she concedes, her voice laced with a profound weariness and a bitterness that stings even in the gloom. You leave us little choice. We will tell you what you wish to know. But heed this, Perseus, son of Danae. Some paths are hidden for a reason. Some knowledge brings with it burdens heavier than any stone. A classic cryptic warning. Standard issue for most ancient oracles and keepers of secrets. You nod gravely as if contemplating the profound philosophical weight of her words, while internally you're just relieved they're finally caving. The nymphs of the north. Pemfredo begins, her voice a mere thread of sound. They do not dwell in any land you might find on a map drawn by human hands. Dano continues, her tone still sharp, but now tinged with a grudging resignation. They are spirits of the wild, the untamed places. To find them, you must follow no path but rather the whispers of the wind and the flow of unseen currents. This is all very poetic and unhelpful. More specific directions would be appreciated, venerable ones, you press gently, trying not to sound too impatient. You're still holding the eye after all. A little leverage goes a long way. Enyo sighs again. You must seek the land where the griffins guard their gold, beyond the realm of Boreas, the north wind. But you will not go there directly. This is an interesting bit of geographical lore, mixing in another mythical creature and a legendary location, often associated with the far north or Scythia. The griffins, fierce bird-lion hybrids, were said to guard vast hordes of gold from human and presumably hero encroachment. It's a detail that adds another layer to the edge-of-the-world feel of this quest. First, she continues, You must find the river that flows backwards, the one that remembers the dawn of the world. Follow its course against its current, until you reach a grove of silver birches that weep tears of amber. There, if your heart is pure and your need is true, the nymphs may choose to reveal themselves to you. A river that flows backwards, silver birches weeping amber tears. This sounds less like a set of directions and more like something out of a particularly whimsical fever dream. And how do I find this retrograde river? You ask, trying to keep the skepticism out of your voice. It is not found by looking but by listening, Pemfredo whispers. Listen for the silence that precedes a forgotten song. It begins in a place where shadows gather even at noon. Right. Crystal clear. You're beginning to understand why no one ever bothered these ladies for casual directions to the nearest bakery. Their navigational advice is infuriatingly vague, steeped in riddles and metaphors. This is a common trope in mythology. The path to magical or sacred places is rarely straightforward. It often requires intuition, symbolic understanding, or the deciphering of cryptic clues, rather than a simple X marks the spot. Scholars sometimes interpret this as representing an inner journey, where the external quest mirrors an internal process of discovery or enlightenment. Or maybe the ancient storytellers just enjoyed being deliberately obtuse. So I listen for a silent song near some midday shadows to find a backward river which I follow to some crying trees, and then the nymphs might show up. You summarize, trying to get it straight in your own head. It sounds utterly preposterous. Precisely, Dano confirms, with a hint of what might almost be malicious satisfaction in her voice. And do not stray from the riverbank, for the lands around it are treacherous, full of illusions and things best left undisturbed. Another cheerful little travel tip. You take a mental inventory of these instructions. It's not much to go on, but it's more than you had before. And more importantly, it's enough to fulfill your end of the bargain. Thank you, wise Grey, you say, trying to inject some sincerity into your tone. Your guidance is invaluable. You pointedly do not say clear or helpful. Now for the slightly awkward part, returning the eye. You hold it out. As promised, there's a moment of tense silence. Then Enyo speaks, her voice cautious. Place it on the small flat stone to your left, and then step back. Far back. You do as instructed, carefully setting the luminous orb on a small, surprisingly smooth stone near where they huddle. It sits there, gleaming faintly like a dropped pearl of moonlight. You retreat several paces, giving them a wide berth. You can feel their unseen focus, their desperate anticipation. The fate of their shared sensory world rests on that little rock. The old sister's secret. They finally reveal the path to the nymph's abode. With the precious, luminous eye now resting on the designated flat stone, a palpable tension fills the cavern. You stand back, watching, as the three sisters, with a coordinated, fumbling urgency that is both pathetic and strangely efficient, begin the delicate process of retrieval. Pemfredo, who was next in line for ocular duties before your rude interruption, seems to take the lead, her hands outstretched, feeling her way towards the stone with an almost dowsing rod-like intensity. Dano and Enyo offer whispered, unhelpful directions. A little to the left, sister. No, my left. Mind the sharp bit of rock, you nearly had it. It's like watching a very slow, very low-stakes game of hot and cold played by beings who have had eons to perfect their non-visual coordination, yet still manage to make it look incredibly awkward. Finally, Pemfredo's questing fingers make contact. A soft gasp of triumph or perhaps just relief escapes her. Carefully, reverently, she picks up the eye. You can almost feel the collective sigh of relief from all three of them. Even though only one is about to regain her sight, she turns, still fumbling slightly, and with a practiced, if still somewhat gruesome motion, inserts the eye into her waiting socket. There's that faint, wet settling sound again, and then Pemfredo blinks. Once, twice. Her head, which had been lolling slightly, now snaps up, her gaze sharp and focused. Sweeping around the cavern, it lands on her sisters, then on the sputtering lamp, and finally, with an intensity that makes you take an involuntary step back, it lands squarely on you. If looks could kill, or at least inflict a nasty case of boils, you'd be in serious trouble. Her one good eye, which is of course their one good eye, narrows into a slit, radiating a mixture of profound relief, lingering outrage, and a healthy dose of ancient, simmering resentment. You get the distinct impression that if she had a thunderbolt handy, she wouldn't hesitate to use it. So, she says, her voice no longer the reedy whisper of a moment ago, but surprisingly firm, almost resonant. The eye seems to have restored not just her sight, but a measure of her former authority. You have what you came for, Perseus, son of Danae, the secret of the nymph's path, a secret we have guarded since the world was young. Indeed, Dano chimes in, her voice still sharp, though her face remains sightless. A secret wrested from us by ophthalmic extortion. A rather dramatic turn of phrase, you have to admit. These ladies have a flair for the theatrical, even in their distress. This academic dispute about whether the Graeae were truly malevolent or simply ancient and put upon continues to this day. Some scholars see them as gatekeepers testing the hero's resolve and worthiness. Others view them as tragic figures, bound by their strange fate and vulnerable to exploitation. Your current experience leans towards the latter, with a dash of cranky obstructionism. Ennio, also still sightless but seemingly calmer now that the eye is back in circulation, adds, "May the knowledge serve you well, mortal." Though wisdom bought with another's discomfort often carries a bitter aftertaste. Another not-so-subtle dig. You're definitely not going to be on their celestial holiday card list this year. Now, Pemfredo continues, her gaze unwavering. The matter of our other missing property. Her eye flicks meaningfully towards the general area where Dano had lamented the loss of their communal tooth. You wouldn't happen to have seen a small, slightly yellowish and rather essential piece of dental equipment during your visit, would you? You feign innocence again, though your cheeks feel a little warm. A tooth, you say? Truly? How unfortunate. No, I can't say I have. Perhaps it will turn up once you have a chance to tidy the place a bit. You subtly scan the floor near your feet, but the gloom and the general detritus of the cave floor make spotting a single, ancient molar a nearly impossible task. The truth is, you'd almost forgotten about the tooth in the drama of the eye return. A strange, almost forgotten detail from a very obscure commentary by a late Roman scholar, one Philemon of Byzantium, whose works mostly exist now only in fragments, suggested that the Graeae's tooth was not just for eating, but also possessed some minor divinatory properties. By holding it and humming a specific, forgotten chant, they could supposedly discern faint echoes of future events. If true, its loss would be more than just a dietary inconvenience. But this is a very fringe theory. mostly dismissed by mainstream classicists as fanciful embroidery. Still, it adds a layer of potential lost knowledge to their predicament. Pemfredo lets out a long, weary sigh that seems to carry the weight of centuries. No doubt. Well, one crisis at a time, I suppose. At least we can see to search for it now. She doesn't sound entirely convinced you're telling the truth, but the immediate urgency of their blindness has passed. The tooth, it seems, is a secondary concern. For now. "Begone then, Perseus," she says, her voice regaining some of its earlier reedy quality, as if the effort of being authoritative has tired her out. "Take your ill-gotten knowledge and leave us to our gloom. And try not to trip over any more ancient secrets on your way out." There's a finality in her tone. The audience is over. You have what you came for. It's time to leave the sisters to their shared eye, their missing tooth, and their eternal twilight existence. The nymph's divine toolkit. You receive the divine toolkit from the nymphs for tackling Medusa, with a final, lingering glare from Pemfredo's, currently their only eye, and a chorus of indistinct, weary mutters from Dano and Ennio. You beat a hasty retreat from the cavern of the Grey. You don't look back, partly because you're fairly certain Pemfredo is still mentally cataloging ways to inflict minor curses upon your lineage, and partly because you're eager to put as much distance as possible between yourself and that unsettling, musty gloom. As you step back out into the perpetual twilight of their domain, the slightly fresher, though still damp, air feels like a comparative balm. You now possess the directions to the nymphs of the north, a series of cryptic clues that sound more like a surrealist poem than a practical travel guide. Listen for the silence that precedes a forgotten song, a place where shadows gather even at noon, a river that flows backwards, silver birches that weep tears of amber. It's not exactly turn-by-turn navigation, but it's all you have. Following the Grey's perplexing instructions, you begin your new search. You wander through the desolate, misty landscape, straining your ears not for sound but for a particular quality of silence. It's an odd sensation, trying to hear the absence of something that isn't there. You find yourself drawn to places where the light seems unnaturally dim. Even for this gloomy region, deep hollows, groves of ancient, gnarled trees whose branches intertwine so thickly they blot out what little sky is visible. It's in one such hollow where the shadows lie like pooled ink even when the pale sun is at its admittedly feeble zenith, that you finally hear it. Or rather, don't hear it. A profound stillness. A silence so complete it feels pregnant, like the held breath before a symphony begins. This must be it. And then, a faint, almost imperceptible sensation. A coolness on your skin, a subtle tugging in the air, not quite a breeze but a movement. You follow this feeling, and it leads you to a narrow, reed-choked stream. At first it looks like any other sluggish, forgotten waterway, but as you watch it, really watch it, you realize something is profoundly wrong. The water, dark and oily, is flowing uphill, not in a rushing torrent but with a slow, inexorable, deeply unnatural crawl, defying gravity and all sensible hydraulics. This is undoubtedly the river that flows backwards. Its existence is a testament to the truly bizarre physics that operate in these mythical borderlands. One wonders if ancient Greek engineers ever stumbled upon such a phenomenon and simply threw up their hands in despair, deciding to stick to aqueducts that flowed in a more conventional direction. You begin to follow its course, walking against its reluctant current. The journey is arduous. The banks are marshy and treacherous, the air thick with the buzzing of unseen insects. The landscape around you grows even stranger, more dreamlike. The trees here are unlike any you've seen before. Their bark a pale, luminous silver, their leaves whispering secrets even when there is no wind. And then you see them, the silver birches just as the gray described. They stand in a silent, mournful grove, their slender white trunks gleaming faintly in the dim light, and from their branches, instead of sap, drip slow, viscous tears of what looks like pure molten amber, solidifying into glowing, irregular jewels on the dark earth beneath. It's a sight of breathtaking, melancholy beauty. As you step into the grove, the air becomes still and fragrant, with a scent of pine needles, damp earth, and something else, a sweet, almost honeyed perfume. And then they appear, not with a sudden flash or a dramatic entrance, but emerging softly from the shadows between the trees as if they were always there, just waiting to be seen. The nymphs of the north, or as they are sometimes called, the Stygian nymphs, though their connection to the river Styx of the underworld is a point of some scholarly contention. Perhaps Stygian here refers more to their remote, shadowy nature than a direct infernal affiliation. There are 3 of them, like the gray eye, but there the resemblance ends. They are young, or at least ageless, their forms slender and graceful, their movements fluid as water. Their hair is the color of moonlight on snow, and their eyes hold a calm, ancient wisdom. They are draped in simple, flowing garments that seem woven from mist and shadows. They are beautiful, yes, but it's an ethereal, otherworldly beauty, tinged with a faint sadness like the landscape they inhabit. They greet you not with words, but with a gentle inclination of their heads. There's no surprise in their eyes, no fear. It's as if they were expecting you. Perseus, son of Danae, one of them finally speaks, her voice like the sigh of wind through pine needles, or the distant murmur of a hidden stream. You have traveled far. The Gray kept their word, it seems. You bow respectfully. They did, gracious nymphs. And now I come to you, seeking the aid you alone can provide for my quest. The nymphs exchange a look, a silent communication passing between them. Then the one who spoke before nods slowly. We know of your task, to slay the Gorgon Medusa, a grim business but one fated to be. She gestures, and from the shadows, or perhaps from the very air itself, the legendary items materialize. First, a pair of winged sandals. Their leather soft and supple, their small, feathered wings fluttering with a life of their own. Then a rough sack-like wallet, the kibisus unassuming in appearance but radiating a subtle aura of containment. And finally, a gleaming, polished helmet, the cap of Hades or helm of darkness which, when worn, would render you invisible to mortal and immortal eyes alike. There is no sword or shield here. Those Athena and Hermes had indicated they would provide directly. These are the specialized tools of the nymph's domain. These we give to you, the nymph says, her voice soft but firm. The sandals of swiftness that you may travel like the wind. The kibisus to hold that which must not be seen, and the helm of Hades, that you may walk unseen among your enemies. Use them wisely, Perseus, for such gifts carry their own responsibilities.